Or just a couple of observations that I recall when I was in United Arab Emirates some years ago. It was part of a tour of U.S. academics, and it was very clear that we could only do interviews and only talk to people that were approved by the government. And I remember as we were all being put up in the Abu Dhabi Hilton, and I was with some colleagues, and they were putting the caviar in their, part of their big buffet plate. And I point out the sense that we might, there may be an attempt to sort of buy us off, if you will. And the colleague who was from Southwest Louisiana State said, "I learned long ago that every man has a price, and mine's not very high," as he put on more caviar. And I mean, and it's sort of an illustration of the fact that the regime has gone to some great lengths to try to impact public opinion, by these junkets for journalists, for academics, for others, and that they have been largely successful in many respects by not making the support by the United States and Britain, the two biggest backers of the UAE regime, what isn't a bigger issue. I recall during that same trip going to speaking to the ambassador at the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi, and we were in the little conference room where the ambassador meets with small groups. And I've been at least a dozen U.S. embassies overseas at one point or another. I've had similar conversations with various ambassadors and their deputies in similar seminar rooms, and normally you have, when you in such a context, you have photos usually of some places of historic or scenic significance in the United States, or other more general photos. In this room, every single photograph was of a U.S. weapon system, a missile, jet fighter, other sophisticated military equipment that the United States was providing the UAE. And I thought that was so emblematic of the U.S. relationship. And the fact is that governments that like UAE would not be able to get away with the kind of persecution of Mansoor unless they knew they had the backing of of these Western democracies. Biden, when Trump was president, he made no pretense of supporting human rights. He made no pretense of supporting democratic change. It was all transactional to him, all power politics, and Biden promised to change that. He promised to have a more rules-based international order when he came to office. However, within a couple months, he effectively upheld the massive new arms shipments that Trump had put into effect, without conditions. And this is a government that the Biden administration has been speaking out, as they should, about human rights abuses in Iran, in Syria, and Belarus, in Venezuela, and Nicaragua, and Cuba, and elsewhere. And yet, when it comes to U.S. allies, it's a very different story. The United States is the world's #1 supporter of dictatorial regimes around the world. And polls show that the vast majority of Americans, we're talking over 80%, believe that U.S. arms transfers should be conditional on human rights. There's probably no single issue where the policies of the U.S. government and the views of the American people are so at odds. And but because most of the criticisms of Biden's policies are from the right, many advocates of human rights have said, "Oh, well, let's defend Biden. Let's not criticize him too much. He's on the defensive. We need we got to we need to be concerned about COVID, about the infrastructure, about racism, about the climate change. I mean, all these important issues, and so let's not be critical of Biden. Well, I'm sorry, we need to be critical of Biden. I mean, I certainly support him against these attacks from the right, but we really need to make human rights more of an issue, because and I think we have more chance now under Biden, because again, Trump didn't even pretend to support human rights. The Biden administration does. So I really think we can apply the pressure. Now, much of the issues, much of the what debate there has been about the arms transfers have been largely about their use in war crimes in Yemen and to a lesser extent Libya by Emirati forces. And and that is certainly very, very important. But I think it's also important to point out that by making these arms transfers, which the UAE really wants, unconditional, they have no incentive to end persecution of people like Mansoor. And that and though these jet fighters are not used directly in the repression of Emiratis and foreigners living in the Emirates, that they are essentially a sign of approval. They are essentially an endorsement. And so it's critically important that that we challenge these arms transfers and their trade agreements and anything else in which the U.S. government, which claims to be the world's greatest democracy, which claims to be a supporter of human rights, that these kinds of it's critically important that in addition to the solidarity work and advocacy in this particular case, that we also look at the broader structural international environment that makes this kind of repression possible.